The changes at home began subtly. Each morning, Joy's footsteps grew heavier, and her mother couldn't help but notice the invisible weight her daughters seemed to carry. The lively kitchen, once filled with Joy's cheerful songs, now echoed with only the clinking of spoons against cereal bowls. Excuses followed, tummy aches one day, headaches another. Her mother, worried, would check for a fever, finding nothing but warm skin and averted eyes. "Just 5 more minutes," Joy would whisper, retreating under the covers. Those minutes stretched into longer struggles until mornings became battles to get out of bed. Joy's artwork hinted at deeper changes. Once, the refrigerator brimmed with colorful drawings of her family, friends, and their cat, Mr. Whiskers. Now, her pages were covered in dark, heavy scribbles that pressed through the paper. Her mother found these drawings crumpled and hidden in her backpack, as though they were secrets too painful to share. Evening routines shifted too. The joyful storytelling during bath time, often filled with magical tales of mermaids, gave way to silence. Joy sat quietly, holding her rubber duck, her mother's questions left unanswered. "How was school, sweetie?" Silence. "Did you play with your friends?" A small shrug. The changes weren't confined to home. At school, Joy's teachers noticed her retreat from class activities. Mrs. Thompson, whose son was in Joy's class, mentioned how Joy no longer raised her hand during story circle. Other parents saw her sitting alone at lunch, shying away from playground games, and becoming more withdrawn. At night, Joy's mother would watch her sleep, trying to piece together the transformation. Memories of her own childhood, marked by subtle racism, filled her with dread. She knew how discrimination could erode a child's spirit under the guise of politeness. The home carried a different energy now. Joy's mother often found her coloring quietly on the floor, struggling to connect with her. The old Joy occasionally broke through, a quick smile while feeding Mr. Whiskers or excitement over a favorite book. But these moments felt fleeting, like sunlight piercing through heavy clouds. The most telling sign was during their morning goodbyes. Joy clung to her mother's hand with an unusual intensity, taking deep breaths before stepping into school. These small acts spoke volumes about the inner turmoil Joy faced, and her mother felt helpless watching her once vibrant child retreat into herself, burdened with a weight no child should carry. Michelle's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages of her daughter's notebook. Each entry pulled her into memories of her own school days, where the same dismissive tones, casual cruelty, and calculated indifference had once crushed her spirit. But now, unlike the powerless child she had once been, Michelle had something she hadn't before: irrefutable proof of the injustices her daughter had endured. The walk to the school's front office felt surreal, as though she were wading through water. Staff members scattered at the sight of her, recognizing the unwavering determination in her eyes. When she reached the office, Michelle pushed the door open without hesitation, interrupting a meeting between Ms. Anderson and Principal Davidson. She placed the notebook on the desk, its pages fluttering open, and fixed them with a piercing gaze. "You will look me in the eye," Michelle said, her voice cutting through the room's false politeness, "and explain why you thought my daughter deserved this." Ms. Anderson's rehearsed smile faltered as she recognized Sarah's handwriting. She began mumbling excuses about misunderstandings and proper channels, but Michelle's voice rose above her. "My daughter stopped singing," she said, her voice cracking. The bright, joyful girl who woke up with a song in her heart went silent because of what happened here. Principal Davidson attempted to intervene, but Michelle's presence filled the room, commanding attention. "Every accident, every ruined artwork, every time you made my child feel small, it's all documented here," she continued, her finger tracing the notebook's damning pages. "You thought you could break her spirit the way others try to break mine. But you forgot one thing. She has me." The silence in the room was heavy, charged with decades of pain and resolve. In that moment, the balance of power shifted irreversibly. No administrative jargon or deflection could shield them from the storm that Michelle had unleashed. A storm fueled by evidence and the unrelenting strength of a mother fighting for her child. The confrontation sparked a thorough investigation. Security footage aligned perfectly with Sarah's meticulous notes, capturing Ms. Anderson's subtle acts of cruelty, careless hip checks during fire drills, deliberate exclusion during group activities, and quiet manipulations designed to undermine her targets. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of systemic abuse that had persisted for years. As more families came forward, a chilling pattern emerged. Parents like Mrs. Rodriguez spoke of their children's lingering anxieties, while others recounted mysterious injuries and shattered confidence. Former students added their voices, revealing a history of unchecked behavior. Hidden in the school's archives were buried complaints, suspiciously high transfer rates, and carefully curated records that protected Ms. Anderson while silencing her victims. The investigation revealed her deliberate targeting of confident children, especially those from minority backgrounds or with engaged parents. What began with Sarah's torn family portrait uncovered decades of harm inflicted on hundreds of young lives, their silent wounds finally given a voice. Parents gathered outside Preston Academy, their voices rising in protest. Stories of discrimination and abuse spread across social media, amplified by live streams and testimonies. The media descended, and Michelle's confrontation with the administration became the spark for a nationwide movement. As former students and families from other elite schools came forward, the systemic issues within educational institutions were laid bare. Preston Academy's dismissive statements only fueled public outrage. Sponsors withdrew their support, and the school's board faced mounting scrutiny. The climax came when Michelle led a procession of parents and students through the school gates, each holding pieces of artwork salvaged from the past. Torn drawings and crumpled paintings symbolized the stolen joy and creativity of countless children. Under the relentless glare of public attention, Preston Academy's carefully curated reputation crumbled, exposing the deep roots of prejudice and negligence within its walls. Ms. Anderson arrived at her termination hearing dressed impeccably, but her carefully constructed facade had already begun to collapse. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her legacy would forever be defined by the harm she had caused. Ms. Anderson clutched her clipboard tightly to her chest as the harsh fluorescent lights of the conference room illuminated her increasingly pale face. Seated before the Board of Trustees, her carefully prepared defense began to unravel before she could utter more than a few sentences. Behind her, silent security footage played on a screen, each incident of her misconduct displayed with unmistakable clarity. As she watched herself systematically intimidate and target students like Joy over the years, her once polished explanations dissolved into fragmented stammers. The pearls around her neck seemed to tighten with every revelation, choking the confidence she had relied upon for decades. Her composure faltered completely as she made one final, desperate attempt to justify her actions. "I was maintaining classroom discipline," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "These children need to learn their place." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications, as her mask of professional concern slipped away, revealing the true motivations behind her actions. In that moment, 2 decades of meticulously crafted pretense dissolved, leaving her exposed. The meeting continued systematically, with Sarah's detailed documentation, timestamped security footage, archived complaints, and testimony from former students and staff building an undeniable case. Ms. Anderson's protests grew more frantic as the walls of her career closed in. Each piece of evidence struck like a hammer against glass, shattering the illusion of her professionalism. A broader investigation by the State Education Board unearthed decades of buried incidents, revealing a pattern of misconduct and institutional negligence. Other schools shared stories of suspicious staff transfers and quiet resignations, further exposing her methodical targeting of certain students and her ability to exploit systemic weaknesses. The system that had protected her for so long began to crumble. Administrators who had previously buried complaints faced scrutiny, forced to answer for their complicity. The institutional safeguards that had shielded her actions were laid bare, powerless against the overwhelming weight of evidence. Ultimately, Ms. Anderson's teaching license was permanently revoked, and her personnel file, once filled with accolades, was updated with detailed records of her misconduct. No longer could her behavior be concealed from future employers. Carrying a small box of personal items, Ms. Anderson walked out of Preston Academy for the final time. The hallways she once commanded with authority now seemed to reject her presence. The carefully constructed facade of power and influence she had built over years lay in ruins, replaced by the undeniable truth she had sought to suppress. While justice was served against one teacher, Preston Academy was left grappling with a larger and more uncomfortable reality. It had enabled discriminatory behavior for years. The school's prestigious reputation could no longer shield it from accountability. Recognizing the depth of its failings, the administration initiated a comprehensive overhaul. External consultants restructured hiring processes, incorporating rigorous behavioral assessments. Weekly staff training sessions focused on identifying and addressing bias, using real-life scenarios to foster awareness. Anonymous reporting systems were implemented across the campus, giving students, parents, and staff safe channels to voice concerns. Security cameras became tools for transparency, with footage reviewed regularly by a diverse committee of stakeholders. Classrooms and common spaces were redesigned to encourage inclusivity, while art displays highlighted the creativity of every student equally. A newly empowered parent advisory board gained a genuine role in shaping policies and hiring decisions. The once sterile halls of Preston Academy transformed into spaces where open conversations about privilege, race, and accountability became the norm. Though the journey of transformation was not without challenges, it proved essential. Some veteran staff members departed, resistant to the new standards, and certain families withdrew, uncomfortable with the curriculum's explicit focus on equity and bias. Yet, new families were drawn to the school, inspired by its commitment to meaningful change. Over time, the culture at Preston Academy shifted, with staff and students alike embracing a renewed sense of accountability, awareness, and inclusion. In the classrooms where silence once prevailed, honest dialogue flourished. Students who had once felt invisible now saw their contributions celebrated. Preston Academy began to embody its highest ideals, becoming a place where every child could truly thrive. Though the path forward required continuous effort, the foundation of lasting change had been laid. Through the pain and discomfort of transformation, the school emerged stronger and more resilient. The story of joy and the courage of those who stood beside her served as a beacon, proving that genuine excellence comes not from appearances, but from confronting hard truths and committing to lasting growth.